how significant do you think this intervention by Washington is?
US Secretary of State and National Security Advisor Marco Rubio, he called up Pakistan Army Chief General Asim Munir, which I think was the decisive phone call. The complicated scenario of the India-Pakistan relationship comes about, and this unpredictability is something that worries the world. That's why US President Trump and the administration stepped in to kind of douse the fire.
The Pahalgam terror attack happened when J.D. Vance arrived in India.
Absolutely. It sort of gave an situational awareness to the US administration at the highest level that the tension was there between India and Pakistan.
How isolated do you think Islamabad is right now on a global stage?
Pakistan was able to rally a lot of support for itself, playing the victim card. We have to see now how General Asim Munir navigates the next step.
Hello and welcome to the Indian Express. I'm Charulata Biswas, and we are here to take a look at the ceasefire deal which has been reached between India and Pakistan. Just days ago, India launched Operation Sindoor, which was a response to the deadly Pahalgam terror attack targeting terror infrastructure deep inside Pakistan and Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. And what followed was one of the most intense military escalations since the Kargil War, with drone attacks, intercepted missiles, and cross-border strikes. And today we have reached a ceasefire breakthrough, and the US President Donald Trump announced it. We can see that Donald Trump has claimed the credit for brokering the ceasefire. And to decode what really happened behind the scenes, I'm being joined by diplomatic editor from the Indian Express, Shubhajit Roy, who's been reporting on these developments closely. So let me first begin with the first question, Shubhajit. You know, we recorded the first conversation when Operation Sindoor started, and now after 4 days,
2:30 a.m. at night.
2:30 a.m. at night. And now today we are sitting again and we are talking about the ceasefire. Tell me about what really went behind the scenes, especially Marco Rubio's direct call to General Asim Munir, which you say in your report is the first of its kind.
Yeah, thank you, Charu, for having me. So yeah, it's been intense, 4 days, 5 nights that we kind of experienced over the last few days. And something we hadn't seen, as you pointed out, since not just in Kargil, since Kargil War, because Kargil War was still limited to that region, but actually since 71 war, when the shelling or the attacks actually reached places as close to Delhi as Sirsa, which is about just 250 kilometers away from the Indian capital. Now, what we saw was in the last, say, as we know now, in the last 48 hours or so, as the hostilities had increased, the government was looking at different scenarios of escalation. And the Pakistan, military was also sort of fighting back, and they were launching drone attacks after drone attacks. And Indian military was defending itself pretty well, through the air defense system that India had. So, which had almost a 90% sort of success rate in interception. Having said that, what really one saw over 3 days, 3 nights, that Pakistan, after being subjected to those strikes at 9 terror locations, it started sending drones and sort of aerial attacks on not just along the India-Pakistan border areas in north and west, where it started from, say, Srinagar, or and then down to up to Jaisalmer, but also in the heartland of India. So, say there were attacks there were threats in Chandigarh, which is not a border town. You
Yeah.
know, you can see Amritsar is a border town. It's one can understand, but Chandigarh was not a border town. So that was a signal that Pakistan was sending that they would want to hit India in the border in within India. Also, Sirsa was, I think, a message to Indian establishment that they were sort of so the threat posture was really high. From the Indian side, India, after attacking the 9 terror locations, which included small urban centers like Muridke, Bahawalpur, Sialkot, they also then took out an air defense system in Lahore first, and then in response to these air drone attacks and missile attacks, India actually attacked those military bases, including some of the critical military bases in Pakistan, which were very close to their nuclear authorities, division where it is located in Rawalpindi.
Right.
So those, I think, gave a message to Pakistan as well that India was also prepared to go deep and hurt Pakistan where the military and the nuclear facilities installations were there. So in that kind of situation, the U.S. administration actually had intelligence that there could be escalation over the weekend, and at that point of time, they sort of activated their administration officials, and we now know that U.S. Vice President he called up Prime Minister Modi and uh, told him about the kind of evidence, this alarming evidence or information they had about some spectacular attack on Indian facilities. And also at the same time, as I said, that these Pakistan military installations were also attacked. And at that point of time, Pakistan was also on the defensive. And US Secretary of State and National Security Advisor Marco Rubio, he called up Pakistan Army Chief General Asim Munir, which I think was the decisive phone call because it was the first time the US administration was reaching out directly to the Pak Army Chief at the highest level. And short of President Trump calling up himself, he was basically deputizing this job to Marco Rubio. He's NSA as well as Secretary of State. So he wears two hats like Henry Kissinger. So I think so that call, I think, really put set the ball in motion, and in a way led to the sort of pause in the military firing, as Indian government is putting it, and the Pakistanis also got the message that it's time to call off the military activity, and so did India at the same time. So the DGMO's call was scheduled between India and Pakistan, and they talked to each other. And after their conversation, they decided that they should stop the firing and called for a ceasefire from 5 p.m. on Saturday. So that's how I think broadly the sort of the chain of sequence of events played out in the last 48 hours or so.
Okay. And you talked about the intel that was shared by US with India on a possible attack on military infrastructure. Do we know anything more on this intel? Has US
No, we
shared?
no, the US has not made that public. Maybe we would know in the coming days. But this was a solid intelligence, and US has a pretty good understanding of Pakistan's intelligence and Pakistan's sort of capacity and their intent. So I think when they conveyed it at the highest level, I mean, Vice President Vance calling up Prime Minister Modi, is the highest sort of level conversation that one can have, given President Trump has been sort of very busy with his schedule.
Right.
And I think that kind of conveyed the seriousness of the information. It was not passed down through, say, the embassies or at a lower down the level.
Okay.
It was so that information was exchanged at the highest level. So I think
Right.
that's how the gravity of that information was understood and analyzed in Delhi.
That also brings me to the question that if you remember, the Pahalgam terror attack happened when J.D. Vance arrived in India, and that was
Absolutely,
the first day,
absolutely, you're right.
right?
Yeah, I mean, he
And
was he was here on 21st of April. He held the meeting with Prime Minister Modi at his residence. He came here with his family, with his kids. We saw those lovely pictures,
yeah,
also bilateral meetings. And
yes,
22nd April, he went to Jaipur. I mean, 21st night, he went to Jaipur, but 22nd April, he was in Jaipur. He gave a speech at in Jaipur, and just hours before, just within hours of that particular speech, we got the information about these terror attacks in Pahalgam. So yeah, you're right. And at that point of time, it was sort of thought that this was done to attract attention of the international media, international, other governments, especially the U.S. government, by Pakistan, by conducting such a terror attack at a time when the US vice president was visiting India with his family. It was not just a bilateral visit, and he stayed on. He kind of he was in Jaipur. He went to Agra. He came, and then he went back. So it sort of gave an situational awareness to the U.S. administration at the highest level that
right.
the tension was there between India and Pakistan.
Absolutely. That made a huge difference. So, how significant do you think this intervention by Washington is right now in shifting the tone between Delhi and Islamabad?
Well, if you ask Indian officials, they've been very sort of tight-lipped about an U.S. intervention. They've insisted that it was done bilaterally. There was no third-party involvement. There were no preconditions. There are no post conditions.
Okay.
That's what the Indian government has maintained, and that is because India just loathes third-party mediation when it comes to Kashmir, when it comes to India-Pakistan.
Yeah.
That has been the sort of the guideline or sort of the touchstone of India-Pakistan relationship since the Simla Agreement was concluded in 1972.
Mhm.
And so since then, in the last say, 50 years, India has maintained that any issue between India and Pakistan need to be resolved bilaterally. But we have seen time and again, where, be it in Kargil, when Bill Clinton called then Pakistan Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif, and give him a dressing down to sort of back off, and Kargil sort of was called off by Pakistan military at that point of time, despite sort of Musharraf having launched it for his own ambitions and motivations. We have seen US being involved between India and Pakistan. What happened was over the years, India had been able to dehyphenate from Pakistan, and this we saw in the last, especially 10, 15 years, this evolution happened, especially after the Mumbai terror attack. I think slowly it moved, and as India became economically much bigger, larger, most prosperous country, and Pakistan's economic situation really sort of went down. I think India was seen differently and were not seen at the same plate on the same sort of at the same level. But I think this crisis has once again brought India Pakistan on the same plate, which is the dehyphenation that had been achieved. It has been rehyphenated.
Mhm.
So India Pakistan Pakistan in the same breath is now, and US involvement, as we understand now from US media reports, was very prominent. And as has been said, confirmed by the President of the United States and the Secretary of State and Vice President, all the senior officials of the US government, US administration have also said so. So I think that's where we are. We have to see how this plays out, because President Trump has now also said in a latest post on Truth Social that he would like to help in sort of bring out a solution to this whole problem in Kashmir, which I'm sure will not go down well with the Indian establishment, because again, India doesn't want third party involvement, as I explained before, because of the Shimla agreement. And I think we'll have to see how, because last time when President Trump, I think, said it in July 2019, when he wanted to mediate between the two countries, and India sort of had pushed back. And to be fair to President Trump, at that point of time, he had walked back on that particular thing. He said later in one state saying that, oh, I would like to mediate, but only if the both sides want me to mediate. But I think this time the tone is a bit different of his post on Truth Social. So we'll see how this kind of plays out. And in the next few days, weeks, and months, we'll possibly see once again some kind of a US overture, US involvement in bringing the two countries together toward a solution. Although I have to say, one thing the Indian government has maintained, that this is just a pause in the military activity and firing. Rest everything, every diplomatic step that was taken, every economic step that was taken, whether suspending the Indus Waters Treaty, the red lines on terrorism, the cancellation of visas, the stopping of trade, the stopping of ports being used by Pakistani ships, the airspace being stopped for Pakistan, the postal services being. So all these series of steps, about 8 or 10 steps that were taken since 23rd April, stays. So as of now, it's not that peace is broken out between India and Pakistan, but right now there is a sort of a fragile ceasefire, fragile peace that has been brokered and that has maintained on the ground. So we'll have to see how the DGM all meeting goes out, and how this has been maintained along the border between the two Pak militaries and the Indian military, and whether there are ceasefire violations of the level that one does not, which is not acceptable. So I think that these are the elements we need to see.
Absolutely. While Shubhajit, US has publicly backed de-escalation, and it has taken credit for this ceasefire. Pakistan also secured key support from US and from other quarters. And we have seen IMF bailout and some muted responses from the Gulf nations like Turkey, Saudi Arabia. What does this say about the international appetite to rein in Pakistan's provocations? And how isolated do you think Islamabad is right now on a global stage?
I think Pakistan was able to rally a lot of support for itself, playing the victim card since May 7th, after this India struck at 9 locations. Right. It projected itself as a victim, and it had the support of China for sure. It's all-weather friend. It also sort of got some support from some European countries. But overall, I think the IMF bailout that you talked about, and that's about 2.3 billion US dollars, which from Indian perspective, it's pocket change. But for Pakistan, it means a lot. And my understanding is it was negotiated and it was sort of vetted and gone through before. And it was just the last meeting that took place was just a mere formality to sign off on that paperwork. And I think it came at a time when the US had the cards, and they sort of, I mean, this, although India sort of raised objections and it abstained at the board meeting in Washington D.C., but Pakistan was able to secure that IMF bailout package, which they were able to project it as a win to the domestic audience, that it was a win despite India objecting to it. So, in a sense, that it gave Pakistan an off ramp, to kind of also call off the military action, because they were also able to prove a point to their domestic audience, and in their sort of definition of victory, they were able to they can sell that they have also scored a victory over India. So I think that kind of tells you about where and how Pakistan played its cards. But we have to see now how General Asim Munir navigates the next stage steps, because both sides, I think, have set new red lines, and India crossed over. India sort of conducted attacks on 9 terror locations and deep inside Pakistan, not just Pakistan occupied Kashmir, and Pakistan was also able to respond. So I think it's a kind of so that's where the complicated scenario of the India-Pakistan relationship uh, comes about, and this unpredictability is something that worries the world. That's why U.S. President Trump and the administration stepped in to kind of douse the fire.
What is really holding uh, the global leaders, back to call out Pakistan, Shubhajit? Because we know we have provided evidence that all the terrorists and Pakistan sponsored terrorists, they have attacked India time and again. So, what is really stopping the global leaders and the countries to really call them out?
I think the terrorism in general has been condemned by the world leaders, and on Pahalgam as well. In case of Pahalgam, India has not been able to share, concrete evidence with the world about linking directly with Pakistan with Pahalgam. They did say that TRF, the Resistance Front, had claimed responsibility, and then curiously they say that they withdrew the claim after the UNSC at the UN Security Council. Pakistan was able to prevail and say that, oh, TRF is there is no dotted line, and the TRF name was removed from the Pakistan from the UNSC statement. There has not been a conclusive proof from the international community's perspective. From Indian perspective, we understand that okay, TRF is just another shadow front of the LET, and that is something we completely sort of the Indian establishment believes that. But from the international community's perspective, I think many countries saw that felt that they didn't have the evidence so far. But having said that, they all understand that Pakistan's record of supporting a terror infrastructure is pretty much public domain and pretty much well documented. I mean, numerous UN Security Council reports, the 1267 Sanctions Committee reports, 1373 Sanctions Committee reports. They've all these reports have underlined and outlined several times about the terror infrastructure existing and operating in Pakistan. But in the current context, it was a bit more complicated and challenging in that context. But having said that, Pakistan did face some bit of criticism and opprobrium from the Western partners, India's partners, and also the Gulf partners. If not publicly but privately, we know that they did convey about these sort of terror attacks being conducted against India. But it was a sort of in the case of Pelgam, there was a slight nuance in how the how the international community approached this issue of terrorism, linking it to Pakistan.
So, will India's diplomatic priorities change right now? Since, like you said, Jaishankar has always said that we will solve any crisis bilaterally, and no third party will come to broker peace deal. But US has claimed credit for this particular ceasefire. Do you think it's going to change things between India and US, or it's going to strengthen our relationship with US further ahead?
I think India's relationship is not contingent on the India-Pakistan relationship. They are two separate, independent relationships. Yes, they both overlap, collide, confront, compete with each other. I mean, not compete with each other, but they have they impact each other. But having said that, India's priority right now, I think, is the fact one of the things that was said was how terrorism is a red line that was reinforced because of the Pahalgam terror attack and the response to it, which was a military response, which was taken apart from the diplomatic and economic and other political steps that were taken. So those red lines, I think, have been underlined. So from India's perspective, terrorism emanating from Pakistan remains the main concern when it comes to dealing with Pakistan. So I think that is not fundamentally going to change. And there are sort of officials also said that, terror attacks will be in future will be seen as an act of war, and all these kind of framing are coming about. I don't know how much should we give more credence to such statements till and officially it is said by responsible Indian government representative. But so far, I think one thing is for sure. India and the US both see terrorism in Pakistan with fair amount of concern, fair amount of anguish, and that will continue lead to stronger security cooperation, defense cooperation between India and US.
My last question to you will be on the China factor. China has started supplying defense weapons to Pakistan, and US stopped supplying eventually. And we also see that there's a kind of conflict that's going on between India and China. What kind of role do you think China is playing right now? Because US has imposed tariffs on China, which means that economically China is going to suffer, and US is also sort of looking at investments in India. How do you think China sort of sees itself right now?
Well, China sees itself as the next superpower in the world. It is the second biggest economy after the United States. It sees US as its only rival, challenger, competitor, and no other country is even close to China. That's how China sees. Pakistan has found China as its, all with a friend. They call themselves but they're a much junior partner, almost a client-patron state relationship that they have. And, China, many Indian analysts believe that China uses Pakistan as a strategic asset, strategic distraction to keep India engaged and occupied. That's another sort of view in the Indian establishment as well. China-US relationship is something that is the most consequential relationship for Beijing, and India has sort of always observed that relationship because India-US relationship is also predicated to a great extent on how the Chinese challenge, the China threat in the world has emerged, especially in the last decade or so under President Xi Jinping. So that also frames the foundation of a stronger India-US relationship over the last 20, 25 years since the Stowe-Talbot meetings with Jaswant Singh. And we have seen that evolve. I think there is a fair amount of trust between India and US, although the recent imposition of tariffs and all of that, that has sort of frayed a bit of India has felt slighted and all that. But I think India has been able to negotiate, navigate that hump a little better than many others, and is now right now talking forward to a bilateral trade deal. US, China is also talking to each other to de-escalate in terms of the trade war. Just started talking, having talks in Geneva. In fact, yesterday itself, on Saturday itself. So I think we'll see some of this play out in the next few weeks, few months. And Trump administration has been pretty aggressive on China, but they have also been, I mean, the public rhetoric has been low, but in practice, they have been sort of quite tough. So we'll have to see how that plays out between China and US, because that will really determine how India is placed in this sort of geopolitical rivalry between the two major powers in the world.
All right, all right. Thank you so much, Shubhajit, for sharing all those details and explaining everything that went behind the scenes and the kind of global consequences that eventually it will have as the dust settles from one of the most fragile standoffs since Kargil. The big question now is, can this uneasy calm hold, or are we just in the eye of the storm? Thank you so much, viewers, for joining us in this conversation. And if you liked this conversation, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel, The Indian Express. Thank you so much for joining. Thanks, Shubhajit.